What was your I am surrounded by idiots moment? At a Halloween party my neighbor's church held for teenagers and kids, my brother and I tagged along for the hell of it. After several stop and pray type events and sitting in the crowded cafeteria with kids we didn't know, we ate chicken noodle soup, listened to a sermon, then they started playing a movie, more like a half-baked wannabe documentary, where a group of young Christians walked around a city and challenged people on their beliefs. If the people they approached were religious, at least believed in God, they just talked Bible talk. If they weren't, though, the Christians started acting super stuck up and rude, like they were looking down on adults who simply said they weren't religious. At one point, a couple suggested they had more faith in evolution than religion. This absolutely triggered the people making the video, and they started the most cringeworthy argument I have ever seen. They started by asking with a super condescending tone, "So, are you saying nothing evolved into a universe and life?" To which the guy, part of the couple, started to answer, but before he got more than a few words out, he was interrupted with, "So then, explain to me who made cows through evolution." Yes, cows. Obviously, the guy was confused by the question, but started explaining the basic idea of evolution. The video group weren't interested in his response, so their rebuttal was, "Okay, so why don't you make a cow right now out of nothing?" Followed by silence and the couple just sitting there with an absolutely puzzled look on their faces. The video group then responded with, "Yeah, I didn't think so," and acted like they just dropped a knowledge bomb on the couple. All throughout this video, my brother and I were looking at each other and rolling our eyes, but after seeing that part, I couldn't take it and burst out laughing at how stupid the argument was and how the ignorant young adults making the video thought they put the entire theory of evolution in a checkmate from that ridiculous question. As I was trying to settle down, I was hit with dirty looks from not only most other teenagers, but most of the parents who were helping host the event. I felt like I had a pentagram tattooed on my forehead for the rest of the night. Needless to say, I still can't believe that a video like that was published and screened in any serious context. I guess they missed the memo about not arguing with idiots. Lesson learned, I suppose. Story 2. I used to be a flight attendant for a regional airline in Colorado during the time the economy crashed. Suddenly, there was a demand for cheap flights in and out of Aspen, Colorado because the rich were no longer as rich and needed affordable airfare. This particular flight was one of our first out of Aspen. This particular flight was delayed due to bad weather. First, I was stuck in the terminal with a bunch of grown child adults who couldn't grasp the fact that takeoff times were not in our control. They constantly whined at me like it was personally my fault it was snowing too hard to leave. When it was time to board the flight, one particularly snobbish witch left her stroller on the tarmac and demanded I retrieve it for her as she boarded. Huge FAA no-no as I can't leave my post while boarding. Then she lip-synced to me halfway through boarding that we needed to close the doors and go. No, witch, we still have 30 more passengers boarding. Then once everyone was on board, I heard various children, teenagers asking their parents why they had to fly with all these other people. Finally, we took off on our economy flight and every other person was requesting absurd things like caviar and fancy champagne we didn't have. Then as we got close to DIA, we had bad turbulence, so the captain asked us to prepare the cabin for landing early. When I asked people to put away their electronic devices, all hell broke loose. People asked me, does my laptop, phone, etc. really count as an electronic? But what really sent me over the edge was a woman who was still busy taking pictures out the window with a huge digital camera. I asked her to put it away for landing. We had bad turbulence and I was literally holding on to the seats to stay standing. When she looked at me and, in all seriousness, said, "It's not electronic, it uses batteries." At that moment, I realized I was surrounded by idiots and noped out of there back to my seat before I said something that cost me my job. I may have afforded her a big eye roll. The turbulence got bad during approach and landing. Lots of people were panicking and crying. As we went to deplane the passengers, the lady with the camera stopped before getting off and was furious with me because her camera was busted. The lens was broken and wouldn't turn on. Guess who didn't stow her electronics? The flight attendant sitting in the back told me she watched the woman's camera bounce a few rows down the aisle before someone caught it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the true reason we ask you to stow all your electronics and other stuff before landing. It will become airborne if it's a rough landing. Worst case scenarios, your crap bounces around and hits someone in the face or something. Just put your stuff away for the most dangerous part of the flight, please. Story 3. The year I was in 3rd grade was one of the best and worst of my entire educational experience, and both of those extremes were because of the teacher I had. She was beloved by most of her students, the female ones especially, but had a habit of being passive-aggressive and saccharine towards more difficult pupils. She'd find or invent reasons to ignore difficult questions, offer vague threats about impending punishments, or make small efforts to turn classmates against one another. She was not an especially likable educator, and she became a truly reprehensible one when she insisted that Jupiter was bigger than the sun. At first, it seemed like a misunderstanding. Our class had just entered into an astronomy unit, and one of our activities was to construct a scale model of the solar system. The reference image we used came from a picture book, and in it, the sun had been reduced in size. The teacher had not noticed this fact and was therefore operating under the mistaken assumption that Jupiter was our largest celestial neighbor. Well, I knew better, and I tried to correct her. She replied to me with a tone of aloof dismissal, stating quite clearly that I was wrong. "That's okay, though," she said. "After all, you're in school to learn new things." Then she smiled sweetly, and I returned to my seat feeling thoroughly confused and frustrated. In the weeks that followed, I engaged in an all-out war against my teacher's pseudoscience. My father, having heard everything from me, sent me to school with one of his college textbooks, hoping to turn the tide of the battle. My teacher refused to even look at it. "Class," she said, rolling her eyes, "who can tell Max what the biggest object in the solar system is?" My face was burning with anger and shame as every other student shouted, "Jupiter!" Things only escalated from there. I refused to back down, despite having been labeled as a class idiot. Each time the topic came up, I tried to offer my evidence, and each time I was steadfastly opposed by everyone within earshot. Finally, after over a month of torment, our astronomy unit culminated in a field trip to the local planetarium. The show was a breathtaking adventure through our galaxy and the universe beyond, and it left me feeling infinitesimally small, yet strangely empowered. As the lights came up, our guide to the cosmos asked if there were any questions. "Which is bigger?" I shouted, jumping to my feet. "Jupiter or the sun?" My entire class sighed in frustration, my teacher barked at me to sit down, and the astronomer looked thoroughly confused. "The sun, of course," he scoffed. A hush fell over the room. After a moment of utter silence, a girl named Melissa spoke up in a condescending tone. "Well, sir, we have a chart that says Jupiter is bigger." The astronomer looked at her, he looked at my teacher, then he looked at me with an expression of sympathy. "Little girl," he said, returning his attention to Melissa, "if you look at the picture again, you'll see that the sun is being shown at a fraction of its actual size. Otherwise, it wouldn't fit on the page." His gaze moved to his next victim, who had slumped down in her chair so as to be almost as small as her students. "Your teacher should have told you that." Upon returning to our classroom, all the students crowded around our reference book. Sure enough, a tiny block of text explained that the sun had been scaled down in the illustration. I declared my triumph, having finally been vindicated. Nobody apologized. My teacher found new reasons to punish me, and I was treated with no small amount of scorn, but I didn't care. From that day forward, I knew to never be afraid of asking questions, nor of standing up for facts in favor of fiction. Story 4. When I was around 14, my sister took me to the Broadway lion show that was touring in our city. I loved it, and at the end, my sister got a souvenir t-shirt of Scar with a picture of him and the classic quote, "I am surrounded by idiots." One day during summer tennis day camp, I decided to wear that shirt for no special reason, just one of the shirts I like to wear. Halfway through, some kids came up to me all angry, telling me that they are not idiots and are offended by my t-shirt. I try to explain that it's just a shirt, but they eventually get the camp counselors involved and I am forced to change shirts because of this. I didn't think they were idiots before, but I did afterwards. Story 5. I was working in a bakery that was located in a supermarket. They had a walk-in oven for baking racks of bread. It was severely neglected as there were scores of carbon buildup on the walls, so I took a scraper and was doing my best to scrape off several layers of carbon that had probably been there for like years. Then some idiot locks me in the oven. The inside of the oven did have an emergency release, and it was broken by the same idiot who locked me in. So I'm kicking on the door like I'm trying to knock the damn hinges off, trying to get someone to open the door, which took at least 10 minutes. Finally, the manager opens the door and he's screaming mad at me that I'm trying to break the oven and everyone else working there is laughing that almost cooking someone is hilarious. Well, I'm surprised the fire department didn't get called. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. Story 6. The scene, mechanical physics, sophomore year of college. The student, dumb as a bag of bricks. She was one of those kids who would repeat what the professor just said in the form of a question to make it seem like she was engaged in the lesson when it just makes it seem like you aren't paying attention. Anyway, we had just gone over gravity as a constant on Earth, 9.81 meters per second squared, and how you can use that for acceleration in certain problems. We went over one such problem and dumb girl raises her hand and asks where we got the 9.81 from. Fine, whatever. The professor explains to her that it's gravity and it's a constant on Earth. Oh, so gravity never changes on Earth? No, sometimes we just randomly hurtle off into space. Story 7. A previous group of friends who were also very religious, not sure if related to the idiocy or not. One of the women didn't know if it was roosters or hens that laid eggs. One of the women legitimately believed, well into her teenage years, that all women turn men when they hit puberty. Numerous explanations that Sweden and Switzerland are two different countries. More numerous explanations that yes, I work in a hospital. No, that does not mean I am a nurse. Yes, there exists other jobs in hospitals other than nurses and doctors. Yes, a hospital bank needs to be open 24/7. What the hell do you think happens if someone gets hit by a car at 11 p.m.? Sorry, the bank is closed. Come back in the morning for your life-threatening hemorrhage. There was also the standard hate and so on, of course, but in general, they were also just stupid. Story 8. A few months ago, the company I work for was going through some pretty deep, quote, corporate restructuring. So my boss's boss's boss, Robert, the district manager 3 rungs higher on the ladder than myself, was walking around with a group of other suits from New Jersey fixing, quote, problems and, quote, non-productivity concerns. They came up to the area I run, and Robert tells me in front of all these suits that I was 18% effective yesterday. 18 frickin' percent. I tell him that cannot be possible. He shows me an Excel file, and I'm trying to explain how all these numbers are wrong, the formulas are incorrect, none of it makes any sense. I have no clue where these numbers could have even come from. I ask him what kind of productivity I would need to run to hit 100% effectiveness. He and the series of suits whip out their cell phones and start trying to drum up the math on calculators. It's an awkward moment where everyone is on their phones drawing up numbers based on more numbers that are all totally incorrect. I was just shocked that I was surrounded by guys and girls making 4 times what I do a year, fumbling with each other, struggling to put together basic mathematical problems. None of them were willing to concede that they had absolutely no idea what the hell they were doing. None of them wanted to concede that the guy who's been doing this for 10 years would know this crap better than they do. I thought Kafka had over-exaggerated the bureaucratic hell presented in his works, but at that point, I was living it full on. Story 9. Sitting in the lab, I asked a friend to help me set up a CAD file to go to the laser cutter. We'd both done it before, but she had just run hers, so I figured I'd have her double-check mine so I don't mess up a 2-hour cut job. She told me a line needs to be trimmed, so I do it immediately. She says to me, "Wow, it's so refreshing to work with someone who doesn't need their hand held through the end of these things. We're in our second year of the major, as architects, and over half the class can't run CAD. That's like studying to be a librarian and not knowing how to read." Story 10. My anatomy and physiology teacher found a baby animal and said it was a squirrel. I didn't think so. Its snout was way too long to be a squirrel. She acted like she had just never heard of the word snout before, and the class sided with her, saying I was just being a know-it-all. I didn't let it go, and the class insisted that I just shut up. Instead of putting it in a box, she placed it on the cold lab countertop, which the poor thing fell off of multiple times, to which that witch scolded me to stop worrying about. Then she force-fed it squirrel formula. It passed away. It turned out to be a raccoon. Still boils me to this day. I'm pretty sure that class hated me. I knew a lot because I spent a lot of time reading. I may not be a genius, but I know enough to see when someone is a pretentious crap. This was my first time dealing with an anti-intellectual crowd where they blindly followed an authority figure rather than hear someone out who actually knew what they were talking about. It's bitter. His teacher should have stuck to teaching anatomy and physiology, not raccoon stuff. Story 11. There's one summer I got involved in student politics at my university and was serving on the student senate. Well, politics is politics, and one party found enough of an excuse to impeach the elected treasurer. At our university, the top offices are actually paid from student funds, and he'd taken an outside internship during part of the period he was to serve. So the time comes for the impeachment hearing, and the procedure is explained. There are something like 15 whereas paragraphs, each stating a reason for the impeachment charges. For each paragraph, the following happens. Vote number 1. Is the whereas statement factual? Vote 2. If true, is the statement reasonable grounds for impeachment? Only if both number 1 and number 2 receive enough yes votes can anything happen. It's been a number of years at this point, but the part that got to me was this. Whereas Article blah of the Student Government Constitution says, direct quote from said document, end quote. Okay, so this is really just building up the argument for later points. Number 2 can't pass, but number 1 is super obvious. Vote number 1. Is it factual? Treasurer's party? Clear, resounding, no. At this point, the parliamentarian and the Senate leaders proceed to repose themselves and helpfully pull out a copy of said document, quoting the exact passage referenced. Okay, they're trying to help everyone save face, which I can appreciate. Maybe they just misunderstood the wording. And time for a revote now that everything's been clarified. Revote number 1. Is it factual? Treasurer's party, clear, resounding, no. There was nothing damaging whatsoever to saying yes here, as the number 2 part, whatever it was at the time, was clearly not grounds for impeachment, but nope, we're just gonna deny reality and pin this with number 1. If anyone's curious, no, the impeachment didn't go through. As far as I can recall, it really shouldn't have gone through anyway, but the sheer denial of reality there floored me. Story 12. I had an internship in the local government once. The department I was working for instituted a new committee to be run by representatives of the community and members of the political parties in town. It wasn't a huge deal, so the people that showed up either really cared about the issue or were scraping the bottom of the political barrel. This one guy representing a party, I hate to stereotype, but he looked very much like he spent most of his time playing World of Warcraft in someone's basement, which is not a bad thing, but kind of not what I look for in a political representative. Adding to this dude brought his mom to the inaugural meeting. She kept telling him what to do in Greek from across the room. And here's what cinched it for me, that local government is not my future. This guy, who is clearly not your top-tier politician, made exactly one contribution to the meeting that day. While electing a leader for the committee, for which there were 2 people standing, he asked if you got to have more than 1 vote. I repeat, this dude asked if he could have more than 1 vote on a question with only 2 possible answers. He held us up for 5 minutes on that question, and that was not the most inefficient I saw local government being in my time there. Story 13. I go to a school that has a very large campus, and all of my classes are far apart from each other. The middle of the campus has the cafeteria. These 3 freshman girls are eating breakfast, and one of them finds a $2 bill on the ground. Girl number 1, OMG, look, it's a $2 bill. Girl number 2, OMG, do they even take those anymore? Girl number 1, who's that on the bill? Girl number 3, I think it's Alexander Hamilton. Girls number 1 and 2, OMG, Alexander Hamilton, you're right. Girl number 3, OMG, I didn't know he was on money. All girls start singing Alexander Hamilton from the musical Hamilton. Me, silently seething, thinking to myself, 1, yes, they still take $2 bills. They are not out of circulation. 2, it says Jefferson right under the picture of Thomas Jefferson in the middle of the bill. 3, it says in the musical, $10 founding father. What bill do you think Hamilton is on? Story 14. I signed up for a summer writing class. Everybody was going into high school, no problem. It didn't seem too bad. How I had learned of this was through my friend, whose mother had encouraged my mom and my other friend's mom to sign us up. So when we get there, it's kind of exclusive to this one program that about 15 other kids had at their school while we were just the odd ones out. Then it was the content that really came out. Beforehand, we had to write an essay on what our favorite book was and why. I chose Ender's Game. Now, I'm not the best writer in the world, but when it comes to that group, I seemed like a king. We had to switch essays, and then I had to grade someone else's essay. There were grammar mistakes everywhere, and sentences were superficial. The person my friend graded said that they chose Harry Potter, but instead of talking about how great it was, they went off into a tangent about how it related to LGBT and some crap like that. Then afterward, we started learning about evidence and analysis, which was dubbed as something else I don't remember. It was really weird to see that people the same age as me in a different school district, possibly the one next to us, had a completely different standard than us. Story 15. I'm not sure if this fits the topic, but I'll give it a go. My girlfriend is from Turkey, and one day when I got home from work, I casually asked her, "Hey babe, do you know where a kebab comes from?" "Sure, it's usually lamb or beef." I previously had seen a stand-up comedy show where the comedian told the crowd kebab comes from kebab animal that lives in African savannas waiting helplessly on the ground. Then they just put the whole thing rotating next to a fire and voila, you have kebab ready to be eaten. I tell her the same story to do my best, convincing her, obviously leaving out my source. She was highly suspicious, but I kept my cool. Of course, she demanded some pictures, and I knew I would get caught at this point, but no, I was wrong. I typed kebab animal on Google and found a Photoshop picture of this llama-looking creature laying on the grass. The picture itself wasn't that convincing, but for some reason, she was like all she had ever believed in was shattered. The meat actually came from kebab animal, and why wouldn't it? She saw the picture after all. By this time, I'm trying not to laugh so hard and just barely manage to keep a straight face. Fast forward 2 days, and she sends me a message from school going something like this. "Hey, I was talking with a couple of girls about the kebab animal and they were shocked. But when I showed them the picture, they all thought it made sense." After laughing for like 10 minutes straight, I had to reveal that it was all made up, and ever since she's loved me a little bit less. And if you're enjoying the video a little bit more, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 16. I was a cashier at Harris Teeter, mostly a cool gig. Genuinely liked most of my coworkers and event management. Upper management, though, was a different story. I was reasonably new at the time, probably a week and a half or 2 weeks in. I'm ringing a lady up and she has a coupon for free ice cream. I scan the coupon and enter price pops up on the screen with a place to enter a number. This doesn't usually happen with coupons, but it's free, so I key in 0. Time goes by, and then, not the shift leader, not the front manager, but the store manager, big store, walks up to me holding a receipt and a tub of ice cream. It's worth noting, by the way, the person who didn't get their free ice cream went to customer service first and they offered to fix the mistake for her. That's what they do. That wasn't enough for her, though. She witched long enough to get the customer services manager and then the manager's manager involved. When I see the manager, I immediately know what happened. With the enter price and the coupon and everything, I was wrong. Fair enough. I made one of those mistakes people do. I'm fine with being corrected, but she isn't correcting, she's witching. Did you scan the coupon? Yes. Did you enter a price? Yes. What price did you enter? 0. The coupon was free. Yes. How can free mean 0? I'd like to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, this woman holds a relatively prestigious position. She's the store manager, and she said to this day the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I actually had to stop and think about it for like 3 or 4 seconds because it was such a stupid question. Like, I hadn't had to think on that basic level in such a long time. It'd be like if someone asked you why 2 plus 2 is 4. Because free means you don't pay anything, and not paying anything means you pay 0. I think she realized she had been absolutely stupid and that it was a really simple mistake to make because she just explained the system after that and walked away, like maybe a manager is supposed to do. That moment, I had a realization. This person is stupider than me, and she's in charge of me. Story 17. Happened just a few days ago. I live in Egypt, and it's extremely common for teachers to talk about their political opinions on tons of matter in class. I am in 9th grade. I have different opinions on just about every single topic about politics, so naturally I just avoid speaking about them. But this time was different. Our teacher was talking about the Korean splitting, managed to snuggle in some politics while talking about a different topic as usual, and started going on for a while. I didn't speak like usual, and I didn't care, except when it got to the last part where I felt that I needed to ask. He talked about how the splitting of the two Koreas made it so that South Korea and North Korea are now both weak countries. I don't know much about strong or weak countries or whatever that is, but I decided to comment about how I think South Korea can't be compared with North Korea in terms of economics, industry, etc., and that I think South Korea isn't a weak country, at least in comparison to North Korea. Then talked about how North Korea isn't a democracy and that I don't think people are happy in North Korea, something he said, and that they violate human rights. He responds to me like I'm an idiot and tells me how North Korea has industrial facilities in China, Russia, and tons of other countries, and that it's a very powerful industrial country, which, if I take it correctly, contradicts what he said earlier. I wasn't sure if it was a good idea to continue responding, but I did once more and told him how North Korea prevents its citizens from leaving the country, and if anyone tries to leave the country, they take their family, or so what I heard, and that the living conditions in North Korea aren't good. Then I remembered what I was doing and that it's pointless, that I shouldn't talk about politics to my teachers or classmates, and then stopped, after which he told me that it's all American propaganda and that North Korea is a country like any other, while I nodded like I agreed. Story 18. I'm originally from rural PA, but I moved to Boston for education, opportunity, and also distance. I come home to visit a few times a year. My family can be quite difficult. They don't see me as one of them anymore. I'm now an outsider. They have always had views that I disagreed with, but a college education helped me tremendously. Ethics, critical thinking, politics, philosophy, I learned so much. A few months ago, I went to visit the fam, and we made our usual stop to see the grandparents. They refused to hug me. I sat down, and awkward silence ensued. They then all, like my whole family, convo led by my grandfather, had a talk with me about how the northern state has taken me, and now I'm a Democrat and I support Muslims and terrorists and all sorts of things that didn't make any sense. I know I can't change them and I can't take them with me on my journey. I'll always love them, but they are going to think and believe what they think and believe. After I refused to discuss anything that was brought up because it gets messy, they then asked how I was doing. My mom asked if I was dating yet. I had just ended a long-term relationship where I was cheated on, and I said I was talking to a guy, but I was only interested in being friends at this point. They asked what his name was, and when I said that his name was Vivek, my mom said, "But you have to make sure he's not Muslim." When I asked her why he couldn't be Muslim, she said, "Because he will take you and sell you." Literally surrounded by idiots. Story 19. When you work as a waiter, you are confronted with stupid people every day. I did this job for 3 months. I think if I stayed a week longer, I would have ended up snapping on a client. The most idiotic things I've been confronted with. Between breakfast and lunch, we had to clean up the whole restaurant. That implies moving the chairs and the tables away and mopping, cleaning all the place in less than an hour. It was awful. One day, we have all the tables and chairs put at the edge of the restaurant. Everything is upside down because we're cleaning. The doors are closed, not locked, just closed. And a lady walks in, taps on my shoulder, and say in a mildly upset tone, "Are you open? Because I want a cup of tea." Almost scream, "Do we look open to you?" On the breakfast service, where we basically have to take away the plates on tables very quickly so we can seat new clients super fast, I had a lady witching at me for taking away her spoon that she brought and was apparently a collectible. She asked me, and I had to go back to the kitchen and look through all the dirty cutleries to find it. Reminder, the spoon is like any other spoon. It's just that it has a little drawing on it, and there were like 400 people before her. Who the hell brings their own cutleries to a restaurant anyway? The restaurant had a coffee shop where you can buy lattes, macchiato, mocha, cappuccino, americano, and hot chocolate and all. One time I had to work there, and a man approached me and asked, "2 coffees and a takeaway cup," and just left. Like, he didn't tell me what kind of coffee he wanted, just straight up asked me 2 coffees and left. I obviously can't make the order, so I wait for him to come back, and when he does, 10 minutes later, with his girlfriend or wife, he just says, "Why aren't my coffees ready?" And when I explained it to him, he didn't seem to understand what I meant by what kind of coffees. Took me 10 minutes to have him say to me that he wanted 2 cappuccinos. People genuinely leaving the restaurant and being surprised that they have to pay for the food. Granted, the restaurant is in a hotel, so I get why you might think that at first, but you don't leave a restaurant without at least asking how the bill is taken care of. Story 20. The dumb people I sat across from algebra last year. For the last part of the year, they blabbered nonstop and were more interested in Snapchat than any assignment. I ended up doing most assignments that we were supposed to work together on alone, and when we did talk, we argued. They hated books and they hated reading. They never tried to read books and said, "We've got Snapchat." I said, "Snapchat is dumb. It's terrible." They were like, "But dude, you've never tried it." I got tired of listening to them, and I just insulted them loudly when they were in earshot to see if they even cared. They didn't. They were the most basic white chicks I've ever met. We even debated politics. I liked Donald Trump, and they didn't. They were like, "Dude, you're so ignorant. How can you not see that he's such a prejudice?" "Okay," I said, "how is he a prejudice?" They gave me a quote, and I asked, "When did he say that?" "Dude, just look it up." When you debate with someone, you're supposed to actually know what you're talking about, not tell people to look it up. Besides, we weren't supposed to have our devices out in class anyways, but I looked it up. I couldn't find it, and I forgot what it was. I found the actual version of the quote and offered to read it to them, but they didn't even care. "Dude, that doesn't matter. That's stupid." "But you're wrong. He never said that." "Yes, he did. I can prove it. Do you want to know what he really said?" "Dude, you're talking to yourself." It makes me mad just remembering that conversation. I've since altered my beliefs, and much smarter people have told me how prejudiced Trump is. I don't support him anymore. But those people thought that I should see things their way without question just because they said so. They said things that were, to my mind, ridiculous and scoffed at me when I tried to defend myself. I also found out one of them is just as prejudiced as he is, saying that you can't be prejudiced against white people. Luckily, we never talked to each other again. Story 21. I've had so many, but here's my most recent. In my job, I have to administer a test which covers basic vocabulary, paragraph comprehension, math, nothing harder than algebra or geometry, and some other general competencies like mechanical comprehension. The results place test takers into percentile groups from 1 to 99. For whatever reason, most people in my area fail the test miserably, many taking the entire time to score in the 3rd percentile or so. The other day, I tested 2 individuals whose combined scores wouldn't have qualified them for entrance into our organization. I sat down with them afterwards to figure out where they were weak and to suggest a program of study. These were both high school graduates, but I discovered that neither of them knew how to divide odd numbers. For instance, after about 30 seconds, they would be able to come up with an answer to a question like, "What is 8 divided by 2? However, throw 9 divided by 2 at them, and they would stare at me blankly or make a random guess. The first guessed 1. I ended up trying to explain how division works and realized that I just couldn't find a way to teach at such a basic level. I ended up trying to compare fractions and percentages to cents out of a dollar, but then I realized they couldn't divide a dollar into smaller parts either. They couldn't tell me what fraction of a dollar 50 cents represented. Eventually, I just gave up. I meet people like this all the time, and I have no idea how they have managed to get by for so long, and especially how they have managed to graduate high school. I know it makes me seem like a bit of an a-hole to consider people idiots because they can't do math, but I legitimately don't understand how these basic concepts haven't been figured out. I try to imagine myself in their shoes, growing up in a less well off area and going through a poorer school system, not having a strong family support system, etc., but I still can't understand it. Story 22. Once upon a time when I was a teenager, I had an OB-GYN prescribed pills, birth control pills, but due to cysts, she didn't want me to do off days, so I'd have a 24-day pack instead of a 28 due to the kind she prescribed. No big deal, except they charged $25 to refill prescriptions if it wasn't at an appointment. She prescribed 12 packs. I said, no, you need to prescribe 16 packs for it to be a year supply. She explained it's fine because I can order the refill before the pack runs out. I told her I understood that, but 12 packs would only last 288 days and a year is 365, so I need 16 packs. She again explained how refills work and my mom chimed in explaining the same. I literally said, you prescribed 12 packs of 24 pills, right? Yes. 12 times 24 is 288. That leaves me short almost 3 months. That means 9 months from now, you're going to charge me $25 to send a new prescription. Instead, I just need you to write the prescription for 16 packs. She explained that there are only 12 months in a year. I asked her how many months had 24 days. She said none. I said, exactly. Then she again explained to me how refills work. At that point, I was getting annoyed, so she called her nurse in to see if she could figure out what I was talking about. I literally took pen to paper. 12 times 24 equals 288. 288 is lesser than 365. 365 divided by 24 is 15.21, 16 packs for a year supply. The nurse said, I get what you're saying, but there's only 12 months in a year, so how do you expect her to write to you for more months than there are? I said, even if it were a 28-day pack, I'd need 13 to cover a whole year. Why? Because 12 times 28 is only 336. So there are 365 days in a year. Yeah, but you can get the refill before the pack is fully gone. It was no joke, a 30-minute argument that was resolved with a prescription for 12 packs and a note on the file that I wouldn't be charged for an early refill request, which was only added at my continued insistence and with a huge eye roll from the doctor and the nurse. And then, 9 months later, I had to explain everything again to the receptionist because she tried to bill me $25 because she didn't look at my file. When she credited it back, she asked why I didn't just ask for more packs in the prescription. I switched doctors when I was 18. I'm sure no one can guess why. Story 23. Obligatory, this will get buried, but I once worked at a movie theater where we had an active Terminator situation. The cops had come into the theater to let us know there was a crazy guy with a weapon in the area and to let them know if we saw him. Sure enough, he came in about 5 minutes after the cop left. I saw the guy walk in calmly with a weapon hidden in his front hoodie pocket. I immediately walked into the bathroom so he could clear the lobby without me yelling, "There he is," and he started firing at everybody. I'm in the bathroom for about a minute waiting until I think he's out of earshot when I hear a lot of police radios in the lobby, so I exit out of the bathroom, past a SWAT team, and out into the parking lot to the theater staff's designated emergency meeting spot. No one was there. Fearing the worst and giving no cares, I walked back into the unsecured building and let myself into the manager's office to see if I could get any of my coworkers on the walkie-talkies to see if they'd been hurt. I found them all inside the office, sitting on the floor. Some of them were crying. The doors to the outside were on either side of the lobby, about 3 feet on either side of the office door. Why they chose to stay inside of a building with an active Terminator in it, I will never understand. Thankfully, no one was injured that day except for the guy with the weapon. The cops fired at him several times, but he lived. I think I read later that he got like 20 years for those shenanigans. Story 24. Okay, story time. It's physics class in high school and we're doing an experiment where we roll a little trolley down a set of rails and use a sensor to measure the speed and acceleration. The sensor works kind of like a radar. Bounce light off the trolley to see how long it takes and get the distance of the trolley from the sensor. Then do it again some time later, get the difference in distance, and voila, you have the speed that the trolley is approaching you at. For this to work, the sensor needs to be at one of the ends of the rails, measuring the trolley head-on. Instead, my physics teacher puts it at a random position on the side of the rails as if it can just magically isolate the trolley and measure its speed at any angle and distance. Even better, every one of the other groups in class follows the teacher's instructions and measures the results they're expected to get. We knew the formula these results were supposed to fit, so why bother logging and processing the actual results? Me and my friend Sam are apparently the only ones who realize they can't possibly get those results, so we try explaining the issue with the setup to this teacher. She promptly throws us out of the class for trying to disrupt class. Luckily, while we're standing around outside the lab, my old physics teacher, who was awesome and really kindled my love of science, walks by, notices the nerds have been thrown out, and he has to go in and explain how physics works to our new teacher. Story 25. I repeated kindergarten twice, not because I wasn't intelligent or anything, but because my birthday was 6 days past some deadline for the school year, and the school system insisted I repeat kindergarten so I could be in the substance-free class of 2000, which was a huge marketing deal back in the 80s. First year of kindergarten was rough. I was the dumbest kid in class, period. I wasn't getting it and didn't even really start until about halfway through the school year. I graduated. I remember there being a big ceremony to celebrate all of us kids graduating kindergarten and moving on to first grade. But I had to repeat kindergarten anyway. At the time, it didn't make sense, but after a while, everything did. Second year of kindergarten, I was naturally the brightest and quote unquote smartest in my class. I remember my teachers were absolutely amazed at how quickly I was learning the material. Apparently, they were never informed that I was a repeat and I was sailing on their praises. But I also found myself the subject of some pretty intense pestering. It didn't take long for me to realize I was just like them the year before. I was dumb, upset at myself, and took out my anger on the smart kids. Now I'm the smart kid and having the same thing happen to me. Talk about karma. But it was at that same moment I realized I needed to cut back and play dumb to match my peers. They didn't know I was repeating kindergarten. I learned how to fake belch at some point and got in trouble for it during nap time. Once the other kids saw that it was me, the smart kid, getting in trouble and making them laugh, they eased up a bit on me. I still thank repeating kindergarten for showing me the difference between what a smart kid and what a dumb kid goes through early on in life, but I am also an idiot. I was lucky to learn that smart isn't intelligence. It's just being more witty than those around you. I was able to breeze my way through the rest of my time in school by being able to outsmart most of my peers. But you, me, and everyone we know are all idiots, and we're all surrounded by them. Story 26. This is a little more nuanced, but I'm going to give this a go. I worked for a financial institution at the time, and one of our big lending clients, we lent TO, did a lot, and I mean a lot of business with China. Well over 90% of the pre-stock shipped out of one company from one port. I can't remember what exactly happened, but a huge kerfuffle went down in the port town and more or less shut it down for a couple of weeks. As an analyst in our weekly meetings, I mentioned that said company might be seeing a decline in their accounts receivable because of it, and we should expect a downturn from them soon. Everyone looked at me like I was stupid. Cut to 3 weeks later, and one of the AEs is in my boss's office freaking out about how said company had a colossal dip in their lending requests, and they thought there was fraud going on, so upper management had issued a full field audit request. Now, an FFA is a pretty big deal. The company would send out about 5 to 6 auditors who spend a week or two going through books, interviewing staff, and looking for holes in the data. They get per diems, hotels, and travel covered, so it's close to $1,500 to $2,000 a day plus airfare. 2 weeks later, I got copied on a memo saying a lot of words, one phrase of which is that apparently a problem in the supply line caused a temporary delay in the company's shipments and that they expected business would return to normal in 30 to 60 days. Then about 20 replies with everyone thanking the audit staff for their diligent work as I gave myself a concussion on my desk. Well, if you like these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.